Good afternoon and welcome to the 10th edition of the Monday Morning Pen Blank Makers series. And today is a special edition, and we are talking about this blank or this blank. And it's made by Tim Nguyen, who is for many years has been a pen enthusiast and a collector of high-end pen makers pens, excuse me. He's into the vintage thing, and he makes these blue lapis blanks, and he's had a couple different versions, and there's for good reason, but there's real lapis in here, believe it or not. And we're going to get into it, and it ain't going to be easy. All right, let's talk about it. Okay, so let's talk about it. And many years ago, I think maybe the 50s or 60s or even earlier, Parker made a celluloid resin that was called blue lapis, or I assume that was called blue lapis. And it was made of celluloid, and it was quite striking and quite popular. Then a few years later, Conway Stewart also got into the blue lapis game, and I'll post a couple pictures of that. But they used, I would imagine it was acrylic or maybe acetate. A couple years later, and well, it's been a lot of years later, Tim Nguyen, who, like I said, is into the vintage thing, and he likes having vintage new pens made to look like the vintage pens. I think he's had a couple done by Tom Westrich and a few by Chris Thompson to mimic some of the older pens. And he's had them made with this material. This material is, it's not easy. Let's just get that out of the way. If you're not if you're not well versed on pen making, and if you've not been doing it for a long time, let me get my light back on. It's not something that I would tackle. When I first got these, I thought, it can't be too hard. But I've had success turning natural materials, and I've turned a lot of them. This one was probably one of the top two most difficult pen blanks that I've ever turned, and I'll tell you why. So what makes this blank so difficult? I think it's the combination of the blue acrylic or Alumilite and the hard surface of the lapis. They come off the lathe very differently, and however the lapis is going to react, it's going to take with it the blue material. So anytime that a chunk would come off, or pieces, small slivers of this lapis, because I think it's layered, the way it's layered is it's like the lapis is kind of a layered. It's comes off in like flakes, almost to say. I'm sorry, it took me a while to figure that out, but it flakes off a lot. And it also takes the blue material. The other thing it does is it pinholes a lot, because I think once you're taking this material down and it opens up new areas where this lapis is, it takes with it the blue resin and creates the pinholes where the voids in the lapis is. It's almost obvious that it's going to do that. Once you start getting into it, you realize that there's nothing that you can do to stop it. Now, what I did when I started turning it was to leave it a little oversized, so when I did sand it, I could get a better finish. But the more I turned it and the more I got down on it, it just never stopped pinholing. However, though, I did come up with a solution to fill the pinholes, and we'll get into that. Now, here's my pen, and you can see I did a pretty decent job. There's a few spots where there's still pinholing. Not too bad though. And the reason is that I started coating this, and this blank was not too difficult to turn, and it wasn't too difficult to bore. The difficult part, like I said, was when it came to finishing. And what I decided on is to do a combination of coats of enamel. And I started coating it with enamel, and I think the next time I'm going to do this, I'm going to brush it on instead of spray it, because I could have got easier into some of these little nooks and crannies a lot easier had I coated it. My other thought was to maybe use solar res or some type of resin that I can UV res, and then it would dry and then I could sand it. But I used Rust-Oleum enamel, and it did a pretty good job, and I would add coats and then wet sand it in between, and I would still find pinholing. And like I said, that's why I think I'm gonna brush it the next time to see if I get a better result. And at the end, I decided to add a couple of coats of CA over top of that, just so I could have a little bit harder finish, and that I could try to sweep up any more pinholing that I had at the end. And it did okay, as you can see. I mean, you can still see where their pinholes were, like right here, but it wasn't too bad in the end, and it did a pretty good job. Anyway, so all of these blanks come in, it's about 3.5 inch blank. And I don't know that he makes a longer blank and cuts these, but I think it's a good size for this blank. And the reason I think it's a good size is because you're not going to use this blank raw. You're going to have to line it. And I have lined this entire blank with this clear DuPont resin, or whatever it is. It's clear, a plastic. And it's lined to about right inside here somewhere. So if the ink were ever to get inside, it would not bleed through, because I do think that it could do that if ink bled through here. Now, I don't know what other people have done, but I think it's important to line it completely. Also, I think it gives it more strength doing that as well. So then Tim sells these blanks for about $60 a piece. And that is not a bad price. But like I said, I would put this in the difficult category. If you're not used to turning stuff like this, it's going to be an eye-opening experience. And if you just spent $60 on it, now, he did sell me a second, or what he determined not to be a very good one, for $30 for me to practice on. But still, and then again, for 3.5 inches for $30, that's not cheap. And if I had ruined it, that would have really sucked. But I didn't ruin it, as you see, and I was able to make a pen out of it. And the color variation really turned out okay. But for $60, I would definitely make sure that I'm, well-versed in turning, and I know how it's going to turn out. That being said, that, nothing is ever going to turn out the way you want it to. Or maybe it does, but I find almost every pen I make, there's something that I, wish was different. With this blank, you're going to get that regardless of how good you are. As I said, I've been turning pens for many years, and I found this to be challenging. I think that you can turn it if you take your time, and you take your time finishing it. You can be successful, but I would not consider this a pen blank for everyone. So as I said, these are $60, and let's say that you were making a kit pen and you wanted to put this on a kit pen. Well, this is going to take care of maybe the cap and there's another one for the barrel. So you're $120 into it. I don't know that I would waste this material on a kit pen because I don't know that you're going to get if you're selling your kit pens, I don't know that you're going to get the return on your investment. But if you do turn it into a custom pen, it's possible that you can turn, if you're making the cap and barrel out of this, you can turn your $120 into $400 or $500, which I think then it would be worth it. That being said, if you want to use it on a kit pen, you definitely can. But there's going to be a lot more finishing involved than what you think. I've seen people who have made these and they've shown me their close-up pictures, and there's quite a lot of pin holing even in their finished pieces. So that's what you want to avoid. So the question is, would I use this blank again? And I work with a lot of materials. I've worked with things that are quite easy and some things that are even more difficult than this. I recently turned my first meteorite ring from a solid chunk of meteorite, and that one was not easy. So anything worth doing is, and I think what I'm trying to say is, yeah, I'm going to use them again, but I'm going to keep trying to develop a way to use them where it's a little bit more user-friendly for me and that the results are better. That was a test pen that I ended up selling, but in the next one, I've got another idea. Like I said, I think I'm going to brush my enamel on and let it dry and then wet sand between coats. Or I might even try something else, but I do think that it's worth investigating because the blank is beautiful. Let's just get that out of the way. It's a nice looking blank, and I think it has a future. And if Tim is continuing to make his product easier for people to use, then I think it's going to get a lot more use in the industry from custom makers. All right, next week we are going to deal with another special edition because this man, my friend Robert Sanchez of Robert Sanchez Pens, the guy with the octopus, he does not sell his blanks to the public. So I'll be making it out of this beautiful blank. All right, I'll talk to you soon.